Welcome back to Spincast, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keegan. You haven't seen me a lot on this podcast, but I am the newly hired production manager for Stay Plugged In, and you'll be seeing me on these a lot more. But on to our guests for this week. We have Lucas Bailey, James AMANN, and Brennan Dicker from Georgia State University. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Doing well.
Great. Good. Thanks, Keegan.
Good to hear, and I'm glad you guys are doing well. How's quarantine treating you?
Well, I can't wait to get out.
Yeah.
So something we always like to start off with here on Spincast is we just want you guys to kind of give a little bit of an introduction about yourselves. How'd you get involved in esports in the first place, and how do you where did your passions come from for esports and potentially gaming in general? And whoever wants to start, I know we have three of you here. Whoever wants to start can go ahead.
I'll just start on my end. I'm the executive director of Creative Media Industries Institute at CMI at GSU, and what really struck me about esports was even before I joined our crew at CMII, I was in film and television for a number of years, and specifically on the post-production side of the business. And so someone invited me to DreamHack. I don't know if you guys are familiar with DreamHack, but DreamHack Atlanta, when it first came to Atlanta, the first season that it was there, this was about, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago now, 3 years ago. And I was struck by the energy and the audience and just all of what was going on there. I had never seen anything quite like that before. And it was in this, entertainment that was just this entertainment scope of being in a stadium that really just, I wasn't familiar with it. So I wanted to learn more. And so the more I learned, the more I realized how much I wanted to, get involved. And I guess the second part of this is I was in sports production for many years in Chicago, specifically with the Bulls. And so The Last Dance, I was watching a lot of that because I was behind the scenes during that time. And, when you think of esports and the way it's the casting that's going on, it's very similar to sports broadcasting. And so there are many similarities to that. And I think that's what really grabbed me on that end of it, saying we should move towards a direction of building that within a gaming program at CMII. And just to back up for a second, CMII has 3 majors. We have a media entrepreneurship major, game design, and game development majors as well. So the students get a really good mix, but I think we also wanted to incorporate esports. So we're moving toward that right now and incorporating esports within our curriculum. So with that, I'll let the other guys speak, then we can come back to it.
This is Lucas. I sort of fell backwards into esports. So I've been obviously a fan of professional esports since League of Legends Season 1 is when I really started following professional esports. But as far as working in it, I started at Georgia State 3 or 4 years ago now, when the original director, Dr. Jay O'Toole, was selected to lead the program as it was starting up. And the problem was that he had a good background in the entrepreneurship side of game development. He was in the business department, but didn't actually play video games. And then so he was looking for, an assistant director to come in and have someone with experience in the games and the teams that they wanted to start up. So my background was actually in coaching academic debate, but I've been a gamer all my life. And so it was a fairly easy transition to coaching and managing our esports teams.
And for my part, as the director of operations at CMII, I've been with the center for a couple of years now, although I've been with the university for close to 20 years. I've always been into competitive gaming, although it was much more informal when I was coming up. I was here at the university at a time when we would take over the computer labs and play StarCraft, and were often kicked out or would get in trouble for taking over the computers. And now we've evolved to a place where we have competitive gaming that's sanctioned and supported by the university. What really caught my eye and really wanted to make me contribute to the program was I saw very early on that it was a new media product in an emerging area of competition on video games, or with video games, but it was an emerging media product that would give students the ability to build this media product from the ground up. And that's just not something you get to do every day, especially with a competitive sport. In almost every other area of traditional sport, anybody going into that area of expertise would be going into an established sport with established policies and guidelines and processes and technologies. And what I've seen with esports is everything is being built from the ground up. Everybody is trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of innovation going on and a lot of traditional broadcast workflows and event workflows that are being challenged and changed along the way.
Also, one of the great things about being in a digital medium is we can communicate fast enough and we can talk with each other fast enough and hold events fast enough to be able to change those norms and challenge them. So excellent. And I want to touch on a little bit here, just a real quick for some of our viewers who aren't familiar with it. The Creative Media Industries Institute is an institute partnered with Georgia State, I believe. If you guys would kindly tell us a little bit about how CMII works.
Sure, sure. In a nutshell, we're teaching the next generation of digital storytellers through emerging technology, which includes augmented reality, virtual reality, gaming is obviously a component, as well as motion capture, volumetric capture, all to tell stories. And so this, runs into different sectors that students are taught. But in the end, they get a good foundation, whether they're in media entrepreneurship or game design or game development, where they can get a good foundation where they can hopefully jump off, get jobs in the industry, and they get firsthand knowledge with all of the equipment that we have there. We have some state-of-the-art equipment that's pretty fantastic for the student to work on. And that really fell in place with GSU Esports. When we saw that we had these gaming degrees here, what a great combination to also have, esports within the same facility. And that really was a nice fit for us. Now, again, it's taken some time to integrate the esports component to it, but when you look at the revenue that's generated out of esports, and it was $900 million in 2019 alone, you look at those type of numbers, we also touch on a lot of different companies that are working within Atlanta and the region that are in esports or in gaming, and so it just makes a perfect fit for us, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because with all that technology coming around and that you guys have access to, I can imagine there'd be a lot of really unique opportunities to get students involved in esports, not just on the playing side, but also in the production, the casting, the graphic design, and every little aspect that goes into running an esports broadcast.
No doubt. I mean, I think that's been one of the big advantages we've had is there's a company, Skillshot. I'm not sure if you're aware of them, but they're here in Atlanta, and Todd Harris was really helped us out at the beginning of CMII when he was over at his other company, and then transitioning to Skillshot, just gave us another opportunity to work with him. And we're coming out with a class this fall through the Georgia Film Academy, a relationship with them along with CMII, where Todd is teaching a course in casting. So what a wonderful opportunity for students. Exactly. No, what a wonderful opportunity for students to get not only the university experience, but also have the professional experience of having someone that's in the industry teaching you hands-on, which we're really excited about.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing opportunity for your students. And speaking of your students, so walk us through, please, if you would, like a typical day in the life of a student athlete involved in esports at Georgia State University, if you would. Like, what do practice schedules look like? They wake up, they go to class, and then they go to practice? Or do you kind of work on a little bit more of a different work life cycle as to how you operate things there?
It's mostly the same as any other college student. They're going to class, they're having fun, but 2 to 3 times a week, they will come into our dedicated computer lab and spend about 2 to 3 hours practicing with their team. It obviously varies from team to team, what they're practicing, how often they're practicing. We have teams for Hearthstone, League of Legends, Smite, Paladins, and Overwatch. But that's the main difference is, like any person competing in collegiate athletics, they come in, they practice, and they try and get better.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is definitely what you're shooting for. And then in terms of a work-life balance, how do you encourage your students to really follow a bit more of the healthy habits? How do you encourage those? Because that's a huge problem in collegiate esports right now, is getting these students to not burn themselves out on gaming and then start missing classes, maybe some academic downgrade performance. So how do you encourage those healthy habits?
So as far as academic performance go, we have actual academic requirements. Students have to maintain at least a 3.0 GPA. They have to be full-time students. So all of our varsity players know that they need to maintain their academic performance. They can't neglect their studies for gaming. And as far as just general, healthy habits, we try to encourage students to keep a limit on the number of solo queue hours they're playing. We have fairly hard caps on the number of practice hours that are going to happen in a week. So if there's more competition, if we're entered in 2 or 3 tournaments, we'll scale back the amount of practice. We really try to have players not practicing and competing for more than 15 hours a week or so. Just because obviously you're right, we don't want to encourage those kind of habits. We don't want players to be sitting in front of a screen for 8 or 10 hours a day, and we don't want them to be neglecting their studies. We don't want them to be neglecting their classes in favor of gaming.
Right. And you said that they have them practicing and competing for a grand total of 15 hours a week. So I guess that rolls us into another good question is, how do you prepare your students specifically for competitions, whether it's on a minor scale and maybe even a major scale? And we know that Georgia State is heavily involved in collegiate esports, and they have a really long history of good performance. How do you keep that up, and how do you keep these students prepared for these while again maintaining that work-life balance?
Yeah, there are a couple of different elements to good performance. Obviously, one of the largest is far and away just mental. Players need to feel that they can do well. They need to go into a match trusting their team, knowing that they can beat whoever it is they're up against, and trusting in what they have practiced and the strategies they've developed to see them through to victory. So a lot of it is really just sort of maintaining that attitude, maintaining good cohesion, ensuring that players are well rested, that they're confident, that they have the attitude necessary to go in and win a match. In terms of actual practice, scrimmages are a huge, huge component. For most games, solo queue or playing ranked ladder can teach you only so much, especially for team games. You're not really learning how to play with a team if you're playing with a random pickup group of people. And so scrimmages against especially against other collegiate teams, or even some like amateur teams or low-ranked pro teams, can be very, very useful because it teaches you how to play against another committed, well-developed team and how to counter the strategies that come out there, which really don't come out anywhere other than organized play.
Mm-hmm. So talking about this then, you've said that you find scrimmages and everything for your teams, and I can imagine there's a place to find that now. But in terms of finding more scrimmages, potentially more organized play for colleges, how do you expect that to grow or change in the next 5 to 10 years? And how does it really need to grow or change? And really anybody can answer this one because of the fact that you're all heavily involved in this and you see it from different angles. So I'd like to hear kind of each of your opinions on this, especially from both the production side and also from the competitive side.
Yeah. So I guess starting with me, I have honestly no idea how it's going to change. I mean, trying to talk 10 years out, the oldest collegiate esports team in the United States is 6 years old at this point. So it's essentially double the current lifetime. I have no idea how that's going to shift. I think what we're going to see is a lot more institutionalization and organization. We're going to see the growth of organizations like NACE, the National Association of Collegiate Esports, that will hopefully provide a lot less haphazard method of organizing inter-school competition and organizing inter-school practices. Right now, you organize scrimmages basically through who you know. You get contacts in other schools, you organize scrimmages with them, but there aren't really large systems for ensuring schools know which other universities have esports programs, how to contact them, who's heading them. All that information isn't really organized in a lot of ways. So hopefully we'll see some greater structure to that.
Yeah, and the field is so new, as Lucas was just talking about. I think it is challenging, and yet, I mean, we're doing it by offering our own events, Pantherland, which we do in the spring and the fall. But again, I think that it's something that we're trying to look at it from a regional perspective as well. How many schools can we get involved, and who's actually out there doing it? I mean, we're in our 3rd season, is that right, Lucas? As far as third year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just finished it. Yeah.
Just finished our 3rd year, and so even with that, I mean, I think we're well ahead of a number of schools that have reached out to us to say, how do you start this program? So it's really getting everybody on board, and then I think NACE has been a good example as far as joining and or at least us joining them. And then I think there's over 170, 180 colleges that are already involved with them. So that, again, that's a larger organization. But again, we're also looking around in regionally to see what's going on and who we can play with, because we want our teams to be competitive, and we want them to do the best they can. So there's a lot of different avenues there that we're exploring.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And so touching on this a little bit more, there's been a lot of talk about the NCAA getting involved in esports, and there are some really good some really good points for it, some really good points against it. So this one is particularly tailored towards Lucas because he's involved in more of the esports operations side. Do you feel as though that would be a good idea for really a centralized body already established like the NCAA to come in on this? Or do you think that NACE is already doing a good enough job and will continue to build up from there? And or do you think that there doesn't need to be a governing body at all?
So personally, I think NACE is doing an excellent job. There's always been a lot of discussion about the NCAA potentially taking over or administering esports. And there have always been sort of two major issues that would need to be dealt with if that were going to come true. The first is that cash prizing is ubiquitous in esports. And virtually no team and no player wants to see that go away. So if the NCAA was going to come in and administrate, there would need to be some serious discussion about how about compensation for players and whether or not players could profit or receive prizing from their competition and tournaments. And the second is the relationship of the NCAA with actual game developers, because obviously, unlike traditional sports, people actually own the games that are being played. And so if Riot, if the developer of League of Legends says, yeah, the NCAA can't play League of Legends, then they can't. There's no recourse around that. And so it would depend a lot on those relationships between the NCAA and the various developers. And I'm not sure what's in progress for that. I know that NACE has done a very good job maintaining good relations with developers and regularly expanding the competition that they offer.
Mm-hmm. And you're touching on a lot of those same questions and a lot of those same topics that we've heard when talking about this unifying body of collegiate esports. There's definitely going to be a lot of challenges with that in the future. NACE, though, is doing a good job. NACE, I'm very familiar with NACE myself, coming from the collegiate scene originally. So I kind of want to circle back a little bit here. I want you to tell me a little bit about your program at Georgia State, particularly with the tournaments that you play in, your rivals potentially. I know you have a rivalry with Georgia Southern. I know players from Georgia Southern because I was involved in the Collegiate Battlegrounds Association. They have a team there. Nice. So tell us a little bit about the specific student culture and competitive culture at Georgia State involving those tournaments and rivalries.
Sure. I think on the whole, we have very, very driven and very competitive players. For as far as rivalries go, probably the biggest is in Smite, between our Smite team and Georgia Tech Smite team. They've been in at least one national final match together. The AVGL finals last fall was between Georgia State and Georgia Tech, and we beat them.
Yeah, I think I saw some clips for that one.
Yeah. But they're a fantastic team. They beat our team in the final match of our tournament this spring. So that's a very intense rivalry. But both players from both teams, they really enjoy that competition. They enjoy trying to better themselves, trying to improve faster than the other team is going. For Overwatch, probably our biggest rival is KSU, Kennesaw State University. They're another very strong local team. Southern, we actually haven't seen that much in the last couple of years. For the first 2 years, they were very strong locally, but I haven't seen them much in competition recently. So we'll see if they can do a comeback.
Yeah, let's hope. So does your whole school kind of get around this rivalry, or is it just involved in the esports department, or how into it and how supportive of this does the faculty student culture get there? Do they tune in to watch matches, or how big is your following within the school?
We've got a decent sized following.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing to remember is the school itself is about 54,000 students. But there are, I'd say, probably 500 to 1,000 people who are regularly involved in esports in some capacity, either attending or competing in our events. They come to use the lab, or they do something else engaged with esports, like the classes at CMII.
Yeah, and I think it's education too, just not only with the students at GSU that were there, we're here and we're actually doing these programs, but also just outside of GSU. As you guys know, I mean, just talking it up, a lot of people just don't know what esports is. Even obviously the younger generation does, but then you're talking about kids parents worried that their students want to do these this thing called esports and what is it, and just educating them in a way that makes sense. I think that we have strong support, and I think we've done that through making these specific events like a Pantherland, which we do in the spring and the fall. And those used to be we had it at the basketball arena one year, and then we had it at the football stadium the next. And James, how many people did we have come in there at those events?
I believe at the stadium, I believe we had over 300.
Yeah.
And the arena, there was less at the arena, but not by much. So we've increased foot traffic as well as online viewership each time we've had a tournament.
And we had to do a quick segue on our tournament this year. We were going to be doing it as a physical presence, and then we had to go 100% online, and that's taught us a lot just in the year of COVID and this pandemic that we're in, as to how much energy we had to expel to actually get that online. But through that, we had some remarkable success as far as views. I know that and James, you have the stats on that as well, as far as just an average of views, but to us, we really see the future. Again, it'll be a hybrid, hopefully, eventually. But for right now, we'll be doing a lot more online events in the future, just because that's where we're at.
And something that really speaks to something you brought up earlier, Keegan, is trying to help student athletes or students who are interested in esports understand that there are a lot of other positions to fill aside from being a competitor, and that a lot of those positions and roles translate to other industries or other pursuits. And that's really part of our DNA at GSU, and why the esports program is in the CMII. My understanding is quite a few universities will have the esports program either in athletics or possibly even in the student affairs department. But we have it housed in the CMII because we see it as a proving ground and a training ground for so many other areas of production, whether it's being a technical director, working either on the switcher or on the mixers, actually engineering the show, working in social media to help promote the show, behind the scenes event management, as well as the dining services, transportation, security. And what we've tried to do, and this speaks to your question about how many people, what kind of support do we get for the program around campus, we're actually very integrated with a number of areas on campus that all contribute to any of our live events. So we work with the police department, we work with private security groups, we work with our own dining services that provides our catering, facilities management, especially through athletics, for use of either the arena, the basketball arena, or the football stadium. We also share much of the technical team that produces all of our collegiate sports for the university. They also work on our esports productions. Most often when we're doing our Pantherland event, either in the arena or the stadium. So there really is a group effort going on. It's not, a small number of people kind of pigeonholed over in a corner somewhere at the university. It's really kind of an all hands on deck, and legal is another area that we work with quite often. So there's a lot of support in the university for this program.
And do you work mainly with, so you said you do work with a lot of external organizations as well, and a lot of professionals in the field, but how many students do you bring in on the production side of this stuff? Would you say it's like majority, or does it share about even amounts? Because I can imagine that you'd want to get as many students in on this as experience.
We do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the goal is, especially for our in-house our live productions, which is where I've arguably been the most involved, our Pantherland tournaments. The goal is really to get as close to 100% student run event as is possible. I would say we're in sheer numbers, we're well over 75% student versus 25% staff. although quite a few of those volunteers and student workers that are working on the production are volunteering to help set up and basically take care of a lot of the legwork that goes into the production. The folks who are working actually producing, doing the technical production, I would say we're closer to half and half. We still have our professionals that work in the university producing the athletics, our traditional athletics events, are doing training and mentorship with students to bring them up to speed on broadcast technologies.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing, and this kind of speaks to the disruptive nature of esports as it relates to production technologies, are technical groups that traditionally produce our sports at GSU have learned about things like OBS from our students. And that is an example of a technology that is directly impacting and disrupting our traditional broadcast workflows. We used it heavily when we did our online version of Pantherland, and there's talk of incorporating OBS more into our traditional sports in lieu of more traditional appliances like TriCasters and different video switchers.
Yeah, OBS is a very versatile program. It can be used for a lot more than most people seem to think. It has a lot of applications for sports that I feel could be used as well. But good to hear that you're getting students involved in the production side. As a professional production manager and caster myself, it's great to hear that there are more people being trained on how to operate the various aspects of an esports event production. Now, we're going to wrap this up shortly, but I have one more question, and I want all of you to answer this one for me. If you had to give advice, or if you're going to give advice, because there are high school and college students that see this actively, and even down to middle school, if you're going to give advice to those students as to how to pursue their passions in esports, whether it be production, casting, playing, it doesn't matter. How would you give them, or how would you tell them to continue on and really turn their hobby, their passion into something that is potentially career viable? And how would you suggest them to defend that to the critics in their life, especially in this world where it's still fairly stigmatized by a lot of parents and faculty in schools?
Who wants to take that on first, Lucas?
I'll go for it. So as far as playing, that's probably the hardest to defend. But I think the two things that are key, especially for high school students that are looking to play at a collegiate level, one of the most important things you can do is, first of all, learn how to practice, right? Not just play the game for fun, not just play solo queue, but learn how to set specific achievable goals, how to create benchmarks for yourself, and work on specific skills. Because most of the time, just playing solo queue, you're not going to get that much better, right? You'll learn some stuff over time, but it's not the same as dedicated practice that's focused on improving skills as opposed to just playing the game. Second, for most team-based games, learn how to play as part of an actual team, whether that be joining an amateur team, playing esports at the high school level, now that a lot of high schools offer esports, or even just like playing with a couple friends on inconsistent teams. Learning how to play consistently with a group of people and how to operate as a team that's more than just a couple of sentences in chat every now and then is critical, because what really distinguishes okay players from great players at the level of organized competition is how well they're able to work within their team and how well they're able to function as part of that group. As far as justifying it goes, that one's a little more difficult. I'd say the best way to justify it is to do well in everything else. Like if you're doing exceptionally well in academics, if you're involved in other areas of life, if you're socially active, it's much easier to justify spending your time on video games than if you're devoting the whole of your efforts towards video games. When it comes towards production or other areas of esports interest, I'll let James and Brennan speak a little bit more to that. But I'd say far and away the best thing you can do is just get involved, find esports events, find production, find anything that you can do, and just go out and do it, because that's still far and away the best way to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I could chime in a bit on the somewhat on the production side, but really kind of an overall outlook as well. Personally, one thing that I try to impart to students whenever possible, especially any students who are volunteering or working on art productions or any other area of the CMII, is really to let them know the value of being present and being eager. So often some students will come to us and they kind of have a tempo of waiting for the next thing to happen, and I try to help them obtain a tempo of seeking out the next thing and making the next thing happen, and really being proactive about charting their course and charting even whatever their next task is, so that they can frankly be valuable to themselves and to others, which will serve them well in their career. And on the production side, I think Lucas was absolutely right. You have to temper expectations when students really have their heart set on becoming a competitive player, and that's similar to some students who we have coming into the CMII who say, want to be either the lead singer or they want to be the director. And if they can't be either of those two things, then they'll be a waiter or a waitress. And, we try to help them set reasonable goals and expectations for themselves and make them understand, look at your favorite video game, look at your favorite movie, look at your favorite album, and read the credits. Look at all those positions that made that happen. Those are all people who are contributing their creative fire to make that product viable. They're all people who are changing their own lives and everyone else's lives by their efforts, and any one of those positions is a viable career path for you to take. And so I think helping students see what kind of a team effort any kind of almost any kind of broadcaster entertainment is today, and helping them figure out which of those areas they might best succeed in and be able to contribute to. Once they've realized that and sorted through that, then they have a basis on which to defend their choice, because they have reasonable goals set for themselves.
I echo all that James and Lucas have said. Obviously, a commitment, is important. You have to have an energy. You have to have some. You have to really want something like this. I can remember, in my own journey with this was very similar in some respects, because I came from a family that was a lot of computer scientists, and to tell my dad, who was a professor of computer science, that I wanted to go in film and television at 16, was quite a shock to him, trying to figure out what the hell am I, what is this kid what is he talking about? So the idea of having to explain that, I think, to me, it was just being immersed in that, and in a time where I could take an internship or I could go to a production company and say I'd help out for free. Obviously, these things have changed a bit, but there are avenues that students, whether they're junior high or in high school, that can take advantage of going on Twitch. I mean, really immersing themselves, if they're not necessarily in the gaming side of it as far as being a gamer, but they like the production side, to really look at, going on Twitch, seeing how things are produced, just visually looking at it, but also getting involved on a local level. And we have Access Replay here in Atlanta, which is a great resource for kids to get involved with gaming. And I think there's a lot of different areas that students can look toward in doing that, and just, read up on things. I mean, I really feel like this industry, like film and television, is very competitive, like you were saying before, even just, even on the side of actually getting into the sports part of this, the broadcast part of it, or casting part of it, it's going to be very competitive. So you really have to be, you really want it. So you just have to, go through and really make sure that that's a direction you want to go. But then along the same lines, learn the craft, learn audio, learn all of what needs to be done there. There's so many different positions. And sometimes sometimes students set themselves up, like James is saying, they want to be a director, they want to be an actor, they want to do something like that. And if they can't do that, then they'll be a waiter. Well, there's so many jobs out there that they may actually be really fulfilled. They just have to learn, and hopefully, like a place like CMI helps them, teaches them different directions they can go in their career to where they can get engaged at certain levels. So all that to say, I think, I hope that students would take the time to do a little more research, but have fun with it. I mean, bottom line, you want to enjoy what you're doing, and hopefully that they'll they'll get something out of that. Instead of it being a job, it's something that's just ingrained and part of their life of what they do.
Well, it's one of the great things about esports, isn't it? Is that they can actually start before they even go off to college to try and learn these skills professionally. They
No
can
doubt.
they can hop in, start casting for some community organization. There are tons out there. You can find them on Twitch everywhere, and that's something that's great about esports, is that they kind of have a few of these skills before coming into the professional production scene.
It's so young right now. Everything you can get involved on so many levels. Because nothing's necessarily regulated as much as you've seen other industries. And so, yeah, of course. I mean, you can definitely do that, and you can do it on your own. I mean, you can set up your own channels. So why not? I mean, just start with that. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's things that we couldn't do when we were younger because we didn't have the technology, but these students do. I mean, they have the technology to do it. And if they don't, they can find through their school or through other opportunities, find the technology, which is great.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are so many more opportunities for younger students in esports now. But gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out and being on Spincast today. If you would real quick, just plug yourselves and Georgia State for me. Tell us where we can find you, websites, Twitters, everything, so our viewers can go ask you some questions if they have any for you.
Lucas, you want to go first?
Sure. So you can find Georgia State University on Twitter at GSU Esports. We have Facebook as well at the same address, GSU Esports. And our website is esports at gsu.edu. Yeah.
James?
Well, I would echo that. I mean, definitely come to esports.gsu.edu. Frankly, if anybody did want to reach out directly to me or others at the CMII, you could also email cmii@gsu.edu, and be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
And
Brennan?
Brennan?
And anyone that wants to learn more about Creative Media Industries Institute at Georgia State, you can go to cmi.gsu.edu. That's our site. Talks about our programs, talks about esports, everything. You can get connected there, and we'd really be excited to hear from people. Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on Spincast today. And thank you all for watching as well. Just remember, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay plugged in.